Quip is optimized for actually creating content on these phones, not just reading it. And I'm really excited for the big screen. I think it could actually make these things more productive than they've ever been.
You know, Brian's got one on set. He really does have it right here, and he was showing off this big screen to me. Do you think it's going to be enough for people to really go out and purchase a new one, though? I mean, we're seeing pretty good sales numbers thus far. Right. Are people incentivized because, in part, of the screen?
It's partly because of the screen, but it's also because, you know, there was a huge rush of buyers 2 years ago for the older iPhones, for the iPhone 4S and the iPhone 5. And so there's a large, or tens of millions of people coming off of contract in the U.S. who have been waiting for something new. And the 12-block line, 12 blocks here for the flagship store in New York, I think best spoke to just how much demand there is. But it is partly because of the screen. Mm-hmm. That's actually going to be very, very big, especially in Asia. You know, where the larger screens in Europe are very, very commonplace, but there will be significant demand. I like what was said earlier, though, about document management on a larger screen, because with these larger screen devices, we actually can do a lot more in terms of, you know, not just Word documents, but really any kind of Word editing or Excel spreadsheets. So,
that's a pretty neat. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but first, take a look at these pictures here. You see these tremendous lines outside these Apple stores. I mean, all the way from New York to Portland, Oregon, where they ran out of stock within the first couple hours. Corey Johnson, I mean, people setting up tents. I mean, this is, you know, certainly become a bit of a cult-like act whenever Apple comes out with these new products. Well, is this one really worth staying up all night for?
First of all, what you're looking at is a marketing event, right? There's Tim Cook out in front of the TV cameras showing how excited people are to get his product. If they didn't want to have lines there, they wouldn't. Look, there aren't UPS trucks backed around the corner. There aren't ships stacked up in the San Francisco Bay trying to figure out just how to measure demand. They've measured demand at every level, including outside the store. They want those lines. This is a marketing gimmick when you see those lines out there.
So is it going to translate to anything more? I mean, ultimately,
it may or may not, but it's something that is governed by Apple. They have full control over what happens outside of their store. They can just tell people, we're not going to have phones, or we're going to have only 100 phones in the store, or we'll have as many phones as we want. You know, this is something that they have a lot of control over as well. It's part of their supply chain, it's part of their marketing strategy.
That is mostly true, but in this case, there actually are some issues around manufacturing. What we know is that they have had some issues with manufacturing, particularly the large one, the 6 Plus. They've had some, we understand, some issues with the screens, and so we're actually seeing, we're going to see short supply of those. And so while I do agree this is a marketing effort with the lines, there is a real supply-demand issue here. I think it's going to push into the next year because, you know, these are hard to make, especially.
All right, talking about supply and demand, guys. Keeping in the tech theme here, I want to get to Alibaba because that was just such an amazing story, and is an amazing story. That record-breaking IPO. Brett, a lot of hype about this one. You know, there seems to be some fundamental reasons why people would like this. I mean, just look at the profit margins. Hey, we actually have a tech company that makes money. Who knew? But, you know, there are some questions, Brett, as to whether or not we might be looking at the beginnings of a new kind of tech bubble when you look at all the valuations out there, not just Alibaba. What do you think?
You know, I think what we're seeing is just the growth of mobile, sort of like the growth of the PC and then the growth of the internet. It's coupled with just huge amounts of investment because people know with these big platform shifts, the next great companies are being created. Microsoft was created in the growth of the PC, Google was created in the growth of the internet, and now with the growth of mobile, people know there's going to be the next great companies created. With all that investment, I think you are going to get the next great company, and you're going to get the next Pets.com. And it's hard for the casual investor to distinguish between the two. But I think, as with the last era, you got Amazon, you got Google, and you got a bunch of bad companies as well. I think it's probably unwise to characterize it as just a bubble. On the other hand, there's a lot of bad investments as well.
Hey, Brett, there's a very famous VC in the Valley, Bill Gurley with Benchmark. He made some comments recently that were somewhat controversial. He talked about the Valley being a little frothy right now, that it's very easy to get funding, that there's almost, you know, pandemonium with investors on the VC side. Are you seeing that out in San Francisco right now as well?
Oh, absolutely. And full disclosure, Benchmark is the primary investor in my company, Quip. But I really do agree. I think the valuations, what's going on is that largely due to the complexities of going public, there's a much, much broader secondary market than there was in the time of companies like Google. And as a consequence, the valuations are higher, the amount being invested is higher, and they're doing it with much less information than you typically have with a public company. So I think there are some valuations that are perhaps a little bit out of whack. On the other hand, these companies are really disruptive. They're making a lot of revenue, and the number of people using them, we haven't seen these kind of numbers in the past. So as I said, I think it's unwise to place them all into one bucket, but I do think that there's a little bit of exuberance.
You know,
certainly.
Brett, you've got such an amazing resume. You co-created Google Maps. You're the CTO at Facebook, creating that like button we all know so well. And you've worked with all of these guys, from Mark Zuckerberg to the Google founders. Taking a look at Jack Ma for a moment, what do you think of Jack Ma, this guy who back in 1999 was a school teacher who created this really tremendous e-commerce company that we're all sitting here talking about today?
I think it's great. I think, you know, the companies I have worked for have not had a great track record of entering the Chinese market, as you know. And I think what we've seen is the growth of these relatively independent, extremely important Chinese companies. And I think that there was an interesting interview with Mike Moritz recently where I think he characterized it well, which is Alibaba's entrance with its IPO really represents sort of the world sort of realizing the importance and the size of the Chinese technology market.
Yeah, and I think it's probably going to do a lot for Chinese entrepreneurship overall as the
Absolutely.
Chinese look to Jack Ma, the new richest man in China.